Hey, this is Trout and Tips. Thanks for joining me. Today, let's work through a whole watershed. We're going to visit multiple locations in one of our favorite watersheds. We'll go from, kind of skinny water at the top all the way down to larger water at the bottom. We really want to talk through, how you might select your water for the day, how you cover it, how you fish it, why you might avoid some water and really focus on other stuff. My buddy Josh is behind the camera today. We're going to go for a ride and hit these different spots. And another thing we really want to talk about is how we are in this transition season. It was summer and now it's almost fall, but we're right in the middle there. And that kind of affects how we're going to select our water and what we're really going to focus on. So let's load up. Are you ready?
Here we go.
Here we go. So one of the things that happens kind of every season is a transition from one season to the next. I see fewer anglers on the water in these transitions. I think what happens is you kind of get settled into your rhythm of fishing in the summer, and the fish kind of get in the same rhythm. You kind of have it figured out for summertime, let's say, or figured out for the winter, and then, well, things start to change. And seriously, I see a drop-off in anglers. You see that? You just stay away from people in the first place.
That's true. That's true. I fish at night. I don't see people.
That's right. I do think, though, what happens is it gets, what was working doesn't work anymore all of a sudden. Maybe you go out 2 or 3 times and you don't have much success and you think, oh, okay, I'm going to stay home, or I'm going to go golfing the next time. I think it just helps to acknowledge that, hey, things are changing. It's a great thing. Now, around here we have, 4 unique seasons, very distinct seasons. And I'll say, too, so we're in between summer and fall. Mm-hmm. So for us, this transition is happening, what's the date, Josh?
September 13th.
All right, middle of September. And, on your waters, it could be happening, a month sooner, a month later, wherever it is. And where you find trout is often going to change. What water you want to select and really focus on is going to change. So we're going up to, not quite to the Headwaters, but to one of our favorite spots, in one of our favorite watersheds.
My home waters.
Yeah. We do. We kind of have 4 distinct watersheds around here. Mm-hmm. And we know them all pretty well.
Yeah.
Austin loves these shorts. Austin makes fun of the way I dress. I don't like them.
At least you wear a hat normal.
Yeah, I don't wear my hat like this, like Austin. Here we go. Woo! So we're up here almost to the headwaters of, again, one of our favorite rivers. And this has stayed cold all summer long. There are not many wild trout up here. It just happens to be. There are not many wild trout. They stock way below. And when we get to the middle, I'll talk through that. But as the summer was going on, it's kind of like, a mountain stream here. And low water usually in the summer. And I've really had to focus on stuff like that. The undercuts. I mean, that's only 1.5 feet deep, but that's the deepest spot around here. I wouldn't have fished any of this later in the season if we get a shot of rain in the fall. I'm going to start fishing stuff like that as the fish move over. Gonna have to start thinking about spawning too later in the fall. The habits of the fish are going to change as the water changes, but especially as the temperature changes. I did fish a lot of brookie streams this year. There are actually wild browns. I don't think I've ever caught wild brookies out of this one, but there are some wild browns in here. But anyway, regardless, I've fished a lot of small stream wild trout, usually small trout, this summer. And I skipped all this kind of stuff right up in here. I didn't fish this. I didn't fish this in the summer. I would only fish it in the fall if it has some water. But boy, I was focused on these kinds of places up in here, especially because I know this piece and it gets deep in there. So in the summer I was looking for the deep stuff like that undercut, and now up in there. But man, the water is really sensitive in a small stream. So I guess like in a small stream, regardless of the time of the year, you really need to be careful that you're not spooking trout. I think that becomes the main thing. Where can I fish and not spook them? Because they're not gonna eat if they're scared. So we're a couple miles downstream on the same tributary. You can see everything gets wider, especially up there. You got a nice little island where things are wider. This is a freestone river. The main river is a limestone-fed spring water river that stays cold all year long. This does not stay cold all year long. That first location stays cold enough for wild trout. This location does not stay cold. I've taken the temperature of 75, 78 degrees in the summertime. Honestly, in the summertime, it's a pretty good river for smallmouth bass fishing. But as we get into fall here, I mean, I've fished all the way through fall. I'm not sure where the trout, go in the summertime, but they're not really available. But they're gonna be here in the fall time. Again, they stock a lot of this. And as we get into fall, not only do the trout kind of come back into these areas, but they'll start to spread out. And that's a big deal. It's a real key thing to understand. I think in the summertime, especially in these kinds of waters, they're very much collected in the deeper stuff, or the stuff where they can find the extra oxygen. But with the cooler temps, again, they're going to spread out. But boy, that's a great undercut. So it's not just a water temperature thing either. The days are getting shorter, right? That's for sure. Less light then for the trout to deal with, and the sun doesn't, come right over their head for as long. You get a shallower angle in the sky. Less light, trout will spread out more. And another thing, so the flies that I use as we get into this fall season changes too. In the summertime, I feel like I have a good shot with streamers in the morning, but not a whole lot beyond that. As fall approaches, a lot of us think of fall as streamer time. And as we get into the heart of fall, that's where you really start to see trout responding more reliably to streamers all the way through the season. Nymphs are almost a year-round thing for me. You can almost always find the kind of water to make nymphs work. But the dry fly bite was so good this summer. I hardly fished nymphs and streamers very much at all. But as we move into fall, I'm going to fish dry flies even less. I doubt that we'll even see a rise today, maybe one or two. So I'd be very excited as we move into fall to be fishing streamers all the way through this water. So let's jump over to the main river, but we'll get higher up in it. We'll talk about the difference of that next valley over compared to this one. So we're going over to your shut up. Headed over to your old stomping grounds, Josh.
That's right.
How long do you live over in this valley?
We lived, right on the river for 6 years.
Yeah, so you probably know it better than anybody else. What are we going?
I like to think so.
Was it like 2 miles, maybe 2.5 miles? I mean, as a crow flies.
Oh, sure.
From that valley over to this one.
Yeah.
But they're dramatically different.
Yeah. So this is, it's all limestone spring fed. So it's trout wild brown trout year round. And that makes it very predictable, very special, especially when you know where the cold water sources are.
That's why you catch all the big ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you don't run into very many stocked fish either, which is great.
No, that's true. There are some rainbows up in that area, right?
Yeah.
Do you think they're stocked? Or do you think they're wild?
Well, I mean, they've been there for a while if they're stocked. You know?
Well, I guess Josh is the expert on this piece of water. He's given me some tips through the years. So it's cold water, year-round cold water. So you do have, it's a Class A wild trout population, the highest rated in the state, really. So you do have reliable fishing. You can come in here and always know that there's fish here. At the last location, it's sometimes a question, are there even fish in this spot? But here, there's always fish, and if you do the right things, you can almost always get it going somehow. So probably one of the biggest reasons the fishing is so reliable is that the flows are reliable. Yeah, absolutely, it gets lower than this, it gets higher than this, but a spring creek, you know, is gonna have more balanced, more even flows. It's cold year round, and there are a lot of fish. So the strategy, you know, all summer long in this kind of stuff, I've been throwing ants tight up against the banks. And on the sunny days, I've been careful not to spook them, right? That's always a consideration. But now that we're coming into fall, especially in this water, I'm really excited to fish streamers. With the colder temps, with the lower light angles, and you have more overcast days in the fall too, these trout are just turned on more. Some people will tell you they're gonna stockpile energy for the winter time, but these trout will eat in here all winter long too. The water never really gets too cold for them. But there's no doubt that, especially too as spawning season approaches, that they're looking for extra calories. So they're gonna spread out, and instead of just focusing tight up against the banks and having that terrestrial mindset, I'm very much willing to kind of meet the trout over here and the ripples and the runs, and there's just so much great water. There's almost none of this here that I wouldn't fish as we are in this transition season, and especially going into the fall. Everything just kind of opens up now that we're getting out of the summertime. So there's a lot of fantastic structure in here. Obviously the outside bend up against these rocks. You can see there's really a main lane coming down through, and I said right now I'd fish any of it. We're far enough into fall that really I would fish any of it. I'll say too, as the fall goes on, our fish are going to spawn late October, even into early December, depending on so many different conditions it can happen. And that spawning is going to happen not in the main lane, but over on the left side. Now we do not fish over spawning fish, but as these fish come in, not quite right now in this transition, but here in just a few weeks, fish are going to come in to this section. Really, they spawn all the way up and down through this river, but they're going to do what people often refer to as staging, I guess. They're going to come into this water, feed a little heavier than usual, and get ready to spawn. And of course, we're fishing during that time. It's great water. It gets me excited, just because Josh and I have both fished here so much, and we know what's in here. We know what's possible, right? That's what it's about. And just kind of thinking through how we'd fish it during the transitions. I don't know why I'm bringing this rod every time. I'm using it as a pointer. I'm not really fishing. Too much work to do. Can't fish. All right, let's go 8 miles downstream. You think it's about 8 miles?
Yeah.
As the river flows.
As the river flows.
But really, it's a lot different down there. So I was on the road a lot this summer. I got a little bit of summer left before I start guiding again. And one thing I've been using a lot is the Trout Routes app. Trout Routes is mapping software for fishermen. It's really the perfect setup. It's like Google Maps with all the terrain view or the satellite view or the basic view, all these different views, but then a bunch of great information specifically geared for fishermen. Access points, fly shops, but especially just showing where there are wild trout and what kinds of populations are in there, whether it's Class A, Class B, different ratings for essentially the quality of each stream. And that data specifically comes from the state fish commissions. So all of that is built right into the app, right into the maps, and it's fantastic. Where I used to use the Delorum Atlas and the guidebook, I've been using the Trout Routes app quite a bit. So you can use the code TROUTBITTEN for 20% off your pro membership at maps.troutroutes.com. Thanks to Trout Routes for sponsoring this. Awesome. All right, here we are, bigger water, kind of down here at the main river. I don't know if that's fair to say. I mean, we fish all of it. We fish this whole watershed, all the way upstream where we were and really all the way downstream where we're gonna go. But the main thing here is there's just a lot more water. Year round, yes, cold water, wild trout. But the opportunities are different. With so much water, it being so much wider, I am not gonna cover it as fast. The water I was in upstream, I mean, I could cover 100 yards of that in maybe 20 minutes or less. Here, there's no way I'm gonna cover that much water here. So the pace is gonna be different. And then another thing Josh and I were just talking about is how in these bigger sections, basically the wider a river gets, the bigger it becomes. The more we find groups of trout really zoned in or focused in on doing one thing. So daily, down here, it can very much be, oh, they were eating on the edge. Oh, they were eating in the white caps, in the riffles. Or they were eating in the deepest stuff you could find. Now, summer into fall, all summer long I've been fishing terrestrials in here. But on this middle to lower piece of the watershed, I was not fishing the ant too much out in this middle stuff. Basically, I waited this middle stuff and I'd fish to the banks, fish to the banks. That's what I did all summer long. And yes, I nymphed, but I didn't fish streamers too much unless the sun hadn't come up yet. And now as we go into fall, already I'm just not finding the kind of response to terrestrials as I had been. They're still eating them a little bit, but I'm having to kind of come back into the middle. And again, I think that's because where the fish not only are, but that's where they're feeding the most. Nymphing is always consistent here, but it's especially good right here in these transition seasons. These 4 seasons we have, I mean, I really look forward to what's coming. And I love these transitions. This might be my favorite time of year. Football started to. And just, you know, the kids go back to school, everything kind of happens all at once. And it cools off. I don't really love the heat of summer in the first place. So I love, it's nice and chilly right now. Just love it. Let's go to one more spot. Let's get all the way down, really to the bottom of the trout water. Lower part of the watershed. Let's go. All right, we're going lower. So what's your favorite? You like the upper water, the middle water, or the lower water? Can't answer it, man.
That's hard to answer.
Depends.
Yeah, it depends on the day, the conditions, and
season.
Certainly flows.
Yeah.
Yeah, season 2.
I mean,
how much time I got takes, I can get to the mid-water really quickly.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the coolest things is we do have so much good water, and we enjoy fishing it all, different types. And even when I set up guide trips, people will often ask, well, where are we going to fish? Where do you think we're going? And I'm like, I don't know. Because,
in the morning.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
the day before we'll decide, right? But I'm not going to decide 6, 8, 10 months prior.
Yeah.
Because there's a wealth of opportunities and you can't predict it until the day before.
Yeah, true. It's unique in that way.
Yeah.
And there's so many options as well within a relatively small radius that's really special too.
Yeah. All right, here we are then at the very bottom of the trout water in this watershed. From this point down, it's very marginal water. There's trout down there, but there's just not as many. It warms up too much in the summertime. So I haven't fished down that way at all throughout the summer. But this is about as low as I go. Now here's the thing, it's such big water that it can be overwhelming. That's the way I experience it anyway. When I go to big water like this, I start thinking like, well, where do I go? Where are the features? If you think about some of the first 2 locations that we fished, that water almost calls to you. It says, hey, here's the rocks, here's the outside bend with the rocks and the structure, and here's this undercut. And you go, fish right there. The river almost tells you where to fish, regardless of even the time of year. This big water, I can kind of get lost. And I often have to kind of dial myself back or try to get refocused and say, I'm only gonna fish what I can fish well. Again, this is regardless of the season. The truth is there is structure, even in this flat stuff. It's a lot of times that structure, it's the rocks or there's a gravel bar over on that left side. There's actually spring water that comes out. Like I know this, right? But I've learned this piece over time. There is structure, but it's under the surface. It's not breaking the surface. There are depressions and deep spots. Again, a gravel bar up there. So I'm gonna look for it. And you might not be able to see it on the surface the first time you visit an area, but eventually you fish it and you go, ooh, that produce trout for me. Why? And then you go look at it and you go, oh, there's a nice depression there. There's a nice valley like under the water. So we're coming out of the summer. The trico hatch is still fairly reliable here, but again, the terrestrial bite's kind of tapering off. Since we've been down here, I haven't seen a rise, but 2 weeks ago, I'd come down here almost any time. I could find a rise or two if you just watch the water for a few minutes. So it's hard for me to convince myself that I should actually fish this flat stuff in almost any way. What I'd probably do is get up all the way, I guess, as far as you can see. There's an outside bend, and that's where the water picks up more. When it's flat like this and it's nondescript and really nothing's going on, if I was to fish that, I'd fish streamers through it right now instead of the dry flies. Always worried about spooking fish, just like upstream. But once again then, as we move into the fall, the patterns, the habits of these fish are going to change, and I'm just trying to adapt. I do find a lot fewer fish. Once the spawn starts, I find far fewer fish down here than I do upstream. And I just think a lot of the fish kind of abandon this zone and go upstream to spawn. And then they'll come back in the wintertime. So that's about it. You kind of got to see the whole watershed from top to bottom. This is how it lays out in ours, in our river. But the same things happen in almost every trout river out there. The same general trends, principles, and habits of trout. So I'm always thinking about that and considering how things are changing, how the river changes, and really how the river lays out to kind of make my decisions about where, when, and how to fish. Josh, you want to go fishing? We're going to get a couple hours in, maybe an hour. Let's do it. Let's go upstream. Wearing a vest now, and do a little fishing.
Ready?
Yeah. That's the master class. Hey now. Find a dumb one.
Found a dumb one.
Did you kiss it?
I bit it.